आपको भगवान का शुक्रिया चाहे. You should thank God that you're here. That's what my parents always tell me. Both of my parents are from India. My dad is from the south, and my mom is from the northeast. Now, having parents from two very geographically and culturally different parts of India can make family visits interesting. I was visiting my mom's side of the family in the northeast. Now, northeast India is different. They still have remnants of tribal society within them. Whether you were rich or you're poor, you lived in houses like these. Now, this is the same house in a town called Pasigat, where I stayed at when I was 4 years old. You have a couple of these houses in one compound, each belonging to a different family. Now, like any good 4-year-old on a vacation with their parents, I didn't complain about anything except one thing, the rooster. There was a rooster that belonged to another family in the compound, and I didn't know or care whose it was, except that its cock-a-doodle-doo at 5 in the morning was enemy number 1 to my beauty sleep. So one day, I'd had enough. I went up to my aunt and I said, "Auntie, please make this rooster stop." And she replied, "Don't worry, beta. Auntie will take care of chicken." Now, I didn't know how she was going to take care of it, but I was going to find out soon enough. The next day, I slept like a baby. No rooster. And what did we have for dinner that night? Chicken. But if you remember, that chicken belonged to a different family. And that family had a daughter. And livestock, like chickens, are sometimes used as dowry in India, where the bride's family will give something to the groom's so that he'll marry her. Eating that rooster was how I met my first wife. Now, if I had known more about my mother and her life in India, I could have avoided that cultural gaffe of marrying someone by way of poultry. According to the Migration Policy Institute, in 2015, there were 15.8 million second-generation children in the United States. A second-generation child, or second-generation immigrant, is someone who was born to at least one foreign-born parent. I am a second-gen immigrant. Both of my parents originally came here from India, and I was born here in the States. Now, second gens, we have a unique challenge, and that is figuring out who we are. We have to form our own identities. We don't have the luxury of automatically assimilating into the community and the culture of a land our ancestors recently settled. Or we don't have it as our only luxury, like in the case of my parents. They at least knew exactly who they were before they set foot in this country. Have you ever had this conversation with your parents? You know, back in my day, we'd talk face to face with somebody, not over one of these magical devil devices. And then 10 minutes later, they'd ask you how to put email on their iPhone. If you've ever experienced that, you're experiencing what the typical generational gap between you and your parents is. And that'll always be there. For second gens, however, we not only have that generational gap, but we have a cultural one, and that can make big differences in our lives. You know, a meal at home is a totally different experience than a meal at school, and the values and social norms that your parents have are totally different ones than that of your friends. When we're trying to figure out who we are as second-generation immigrants, we not only have that generational gap, but we also have a cultural one that divides us, and that can lead to anonymity. Anonymity? How can a parent who's there be anonymous, unknown to a child? We know our parents. We know their little quirks, but do we know why they do these things? We see our parents as these guardian figures in our lives, but do we really know them? I don't think everyone can answer yes. I hope that I can answer yes. So that's why I'm here to share with you what I've learned from my parents. So, these are my parents. My dad's name is Satya, and my mom's name is Mary. And my dad comes from the state called Kerala in the south, and my mom comes from the state called Arunachal Pradesh in the northeast. Now, my mom was born in a town called Along. And though to this day, whenever I ask for her age, she says that she's sweet 16. But I've used modern day technology to figure out that she was born around the late 1960s. So for her early part of her life, my mom grew up with her parents. On weekdays, she'd go to elementary school, and on weekends, she'd work in the fields. When she was older, she moved in with her father's brother, Tommy Uncle, to go to middle school in a different city. There, far away from her parents, far away from a lot of adult supervision, she began to experiment in new things. Things that her parents wouldn't even imagine of. Things like cake, Western toilets, and the biggest and baddest of them all, the sensation that was sweeping that part of the nation, Catholicism. Yes, Catholicism, this new fad religion. My mom was hooked by its offer of a free education. Now, she practiced her tribal religion, Doni Polo, but what has worshiping the sun and the moon ever done for her? It surely hasn't offered her a free education. My mom learned about Catholic school by word of mouth, and she wanted to go. Tommy Uncle didn't. Her parents didn't. Why do you want to run away from the family? Why do you want to become a Catholic? Don't you care about the tribe? For my mom, the tribe is everything. The tribe and the family are one. You follow the tribe's religions, Doni Polo, because they're your family's religions. They're part of your identity. My mom was born Agori Talom. You know, in her family, it's a tradition where the daughters are named with a syllable that starts with A. Now, when she became baptized, her name became Mary Talom, a juxtaposition between a Catholic given name and a tribal family name. My mom didn't see becoming Catholic as an intentional departure from her people. She saw it as a sacrifice, as a compromise. My mom wanted to get a better opportunity. In Catholic school, she learned English and received a free education far better than anyone in her family had ever received before. Yes, she spent years in isolation far away from her family, in a city, in a state far away. But she was able to climb the social and economic ladder from the education she received by going to dentistry school. My mom became a Catholic so that she could go to a better school, and so that she could threaten that God would smite me down whenever I didn't take out the trash. But she never abandoned her family. No, my mom just sought prosperity elsewhere to bring it back. My mother's mother used to live in a house like this. Thanks to my mother, she now lives in a house like this. So, you can never win in an argument against my dad. He'll just use his psychiatry skills to invalidate you. So he was the middle child of his family, a traditional South Indian one. His parents were arranged, married, and his father was in the Air Force, and his mother fed, raised, and took the kids to temple to pray before all of their exams. He was in a quintessential nuclear family by Indian standards. But if one thing goes wrong or the conditions aren't right, anything nuclear can have a meltdown. If you know me or my dad, we love to bring up my dad's maternal uncle, Kunjara Mama. This man is so eccentric. He once tried to build and grow banana trees in the front lawn and mushrooms in the bathtub of a foreign Sai Baba devotee he was house sitting for. We still have the bathtub. But as funny as these stories are, they all stem from one thing, and the fact is that mental illness runs in my father's mother's side of the family. Mental illness that can make functioning families dysfunctional. My dad's mother had schizophrenia, and that schizophrenia took away the mother figure from my dad's family when he was only in the 5th grade. Now imagine, the person that feeds, raises, and takes you to temple to pray before all of your exams is now gone. And on top of that, you're moving all around the town. My dad was a military brat. His father was in the Air Force. So that meant he could tell us about stories of living in all these different big cities like Jaipur, Delhi, Bangalore, Agra. But it was also a time of war between India and Pakistan. So he would tell me of the times where he would have to duck into the trench when the bombs fell. All of this without a mother in the photo and with a father who was working all the time. Who would take care of the kids? Who would take care of the older brother, himself, and the youngest daughter? It was him. The middle child. It had to be the middle child. The oldest brother had to go and study to get into a good university, and the youngest daughter was too young to take care of everyone. My dad learned how to cook from his mother, and he became the one to feed, raise, and take the kids to temple to pray before all of their exams. And yes, it did take a toll on him. My dad never showed up to the 5th grade, and it's only because of the grace and the generosity of a teacher was he able to slip past into the 6th. It may have been those days of hardship, those days where he was able to see how devastating mental illness could be to somebody, that pushed him to become a psychiatrist. My dad chose a profession because he wanted to see a different world, a world different than that of his childhood. And now he's in a position where he can lift that burden off of people, the same burden he bore when raising a family afflicted by mental illness. I take that to heart You know, when figuring out what I wanted to do for college, I had to really think about what I wanted to see change in the world. I'm pissed off by political division and by the lack of minorities in office. And that's why I decided to pursue politics, political science. My dad and I, we both found something we're passionate in and began to start careers off of that. So my mom and my dad met in medical school. My mom was starting dentistry school, and my dad was finishing up his last year in med school. My mom, Mary, had a roommate named Nalini. She was living in the dorms. And Nalini had a friend, Satya. And Satya, he's this loud, he's this friendly guy, you know. He knows everyone. He'll help everyone. He hangs around all the girls, all the time. And he would also hang around Nalini. So Mary would get to know this guy. She saw him frequently. And what did Mary originally think of Satya? That he's the most annoying and obnoxious man there is. My God, he's so loud. He's so friendly. He'll greet everyone, even from afar. But when Nalini found herself with a homesick roommate, she asked Satya to go take her to church. So Satya took Mary to church. They got rice bowls at a Chinese restaurant, and they got cake at a bakery. And according to my parents, that was the story of their first date. Now, that sounds like a mushy-gushy, ordinary, cute love story of how two people met. And you're absolutely right. In a country where the cultures of both my parents pushed for arranged marriages, here is a story of unarranged love. My parents are totally different people. They speak different languages, they eat different things, they wear different clothes, and yet they've been able to come together and create a lasting union 24 years and counting. A union that has weathered its ups and downs, a union that has taken the risk to travel to a foreign land 7,667 miles away. I hope that, just like my parents, I too will find somebody to love, no matter how different we are. The only difference that I'd have is that I wouldn't want my mother-in-law to throw fire at me the first time that I met my wife's family. I've learned a lot from my parents. I'm lucky because they were so open to me. Those stories and many more like them have helped put in perspective how they've developed as people and how they've grown up and formed their own identities. I know my parents. I know why my mom is an avid gardener, because she feels connected to her own mother who taught her how to garden. I know why my dad insists that I learn how to do housework and cook, because it's those same skills that helped his family survive. I know my parents, and because I know the hardships they've faced to get me to where I am today, I feel like I'm better prepared to figure out who I am myself. First-generation immigrant parents come to this country so that their kids will have a better world to grow up in. And when we're trying to figure out who we are, what we stand for, and what we want to see from this world, let's ask our parents about their past worlds. Let's learn from their stories. Let's learn from their challenges. Let's learn from their dreams. There is a gap of anonymity that exists between our parents and ourselves. And when we're trying to figure out who we are, it surely doesn't help if we don't know who our parents are in the first place. But we can bridge that gap simply by learning about ourselves from our parents, by asking them one simple question. What was your childhood like? Thank you.